Hi, I'm Rebecca Sheikh from Flourishing Childhood, and I'm an Aware Parenting Level 2 teacher and parent educator in South East London. I'm on the Executive Council of the International Attachment Network, and so thrilled to be hosting a series of hopeful conversations to support families to strengthen attachment during COVID-19. So, the International Attachment Network promotes the fundamental role of attachment theory in all aspects of human connection. They advocate and educate on its application for improved outcomes in the fields of psychological health, healthcare, social care, education, public policy, and beyond. Established in 1992 by close colleagues of John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory. So today, we will be speaking to Dr. Solter from the Aware Parenting Institute. I'm so grateful that Dr. Solter has kindly offered her time to share her incredible work with us today that can profoundly support attachments with our children. Welcome, Dr. Solter.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to talk with you.
Wonderful. So just to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about how you created the Aware Parenting Institute and also a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a Swiss and American developmental psychologist. So I spent my youth in Geneva, Switzerland, where I studied with Jean Piaget at the University of Geneva. And I actually earned a master's degree in human biology there. And then I moved to California, where I earned a Ph.D. in developmental psychology. And then I became a mother. And I like to tell people that's when I really started learning about child development. So this was it. My son was born in 1977. There was already lots of good information about attachment and non-punitive discipline, which what I wanted to do, but there wasn't a whole lot of information about trauma and helping children heal from trauma. And so my son had a very difficult birth, and I saw very early on that he was impacted by that. And I realized that there's a lot of information about psychotherapy with adults, but that information wasn't getting to parents, and it wasn't being used with children, and especially not with babies. Mm-hmm. So I did what I had learned from studying some of the deep feeling therapies. He cried a lot. He didn't sleep well. I just held him in my arms and loved him and let him cry. And I noticed profound changes, profound improvement in his behavior. So I was wondering why there were no books about this. So that was my motivation for writing my first book, which is The Aware Baby.
Yes, and that was the first book I came across when I was really struggling with my daughter, and it just was like a light switched on for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because, I struggled. I didn't have this information, and I wrote it to help other parents help their babies especially who had a traumatic birth, and who needed to heal from that. And, it was showing in their behavior and their inability to sleep well, connect well, even. So that's basically why I wrote it. And then I eventually wrote several other books. It started to develop. People started asking me if they could teach this approach. I said, sure, go ahead. And then they said, well, we'd like some kind of certificate from you. So I developed a training program, a certification program for people who want to be aware parenting instructors. And I'm so glad you're even advanced to level 2 instructor now. So that's basically why I did it and how I did it. It's all research based. So my primary goal is to get the research to parents, get all the information we have about attachment and trauma and the brain research and therapy and the effects of different kinds of approaches to discipline on children. That information I didn't feel was getting to the parents who really need it. So that's really why I started this whole movement.
And I think that's why I really love teaching it so much, because I feel it's based on sound developmental psychology, research, neuroscience, and it's just really factual information that parents should all know, and we don't have access to. So it's so wonderful we have this range of research that you've gathered together to support parents. I was just wondering, would you mind sharing? I know there's three main aspects of aware parenting.
Right.
Would you share what the three main aspects of the aware parenting philosophy is?
So the three aspects are, so basically it's attachment style parenting, that's number one. And then non-punitive discipline, or actually non-authoritarian discipline, which means no punishments, but also no reward systems. And the third aspect is recognizing the impact of stress and trauma on children and helping them heal from stress and trauma. It's basically preventive parenting and therapeutic parenting.
And the big part for me was coming across the non-punitive discipline, because I was a teacher for 17 years and I used timeouts in my classroom, rewards. And so it's just wonderful and very hard for me as well, coming across this new way of doing things that actually made so much more sense to me, that sort of intrinsic motivation. So I'm really passionate about all three of those aspects. I just wanted to sort of break them down a little bit. Could you just explain a bit more about the attachment style parenting?
Yeah, well, attachment parenting, that was actually already sort of around when my first child was born in 1977. There was already a book called The Family Bed, but no one had yet coined the term attachment parenting. Basically, attachment parenting is focusing on the connection between not only mother and child, but both parents and the child. And it's lots of closeness, avoiding long separations, co-sleeping or the family bed, breastfeeding, lots of holding, baby wearing, we call it with a pouch or slings, just being very attuned, and prompt responsiveness to crying, important aspect of it. So doing just whatever it takes to really strengthen, to create a strong attachment and keep that strong.
Yes, because I sometimes feel the attachment parenting has gone so far away from just the real basics. It's just about this really strong attachment you have with your baby and child that's ongoing. It's not just during that first year of life. It's this continuous attachment, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. It's a attachment. We can talk about that at age 5, 10, age 20. There's still ways that we can keep that attachment strong. But especially for the first year is especially important, the first few years, for creating a strong, really parent-child connection.
The other question that I'd like to ask is going on to the second aspect, the one I mentioned, the non-punitive discipline, because obviously that's something I'm really passionate about, using lots of play techniques and just looking a little bit deeper at how we can support our children without using punishments and rewards. What does that look like?
Well, it's kind of hard to envision for people who have not been raised this way. People ask me, okay, you don't like punishments, you don't even like timeout, you don't even like rewards. What do you do? What's left? What tools are there? Well, the whole I tell them, okay, let's say you're living with your partner, and you have an argument, you have a disagreement, you have a conflict. What do you do? It's like asking that. And they tell me, well, we talk about it. We try to work it out, which I say, exactly. Okay, so the same as with children. I have a relationship with children. You try to figure out what's going on. So basically, the aware parenting approach involves, instead of trying to just change the behavior superficially, okay, it involves looking beneath the surface and trying to figure out why the child is doing what they're doing. Okay, so why is the child leaving a mess? Why is the child scribbling on the walls? Why is the child hitting the baby sister? Okay, whatever it is, whatever behavior you want to change, there's always a reason. And we can't even begin to create meaningful change that really works and that lasts without understanding why children act the way they do.
Yeah, I've got a little example. During the pandemic, my daughter had a really bad day. She just, oh gosh, she's fighting with a sibling and speaking really rudely to me and just behaving in a kind of obnoxious way all day long. And finally, we went to bed, and I lie down with her every night as she goes to sleep. And she just suddenly said, "Mummy, are you vulnerable?" And I think all day she had been bubbling with this feeling of worry and, just uncertainty, and something felt not right inside of her. And finally, at bedtime, I was able to discover what it was about. But I thought, it's so worth looking beneath all that behavior.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's always a reason. Yeah. How old is she now, your daughter?
7.
7. And she asked, "Are you vulnerable?" That's so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. Because my mom's vulnerable, so we talk a lot about who's vulnerable and who isn't, and my mom's in isolation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, she was fine the next day after she was able to express that, and I was able to share, that I'm looking after myself and taking my vitamin C, and everything's okay, and I'm, doing my exercise, so I'm quite healthy at the moment.
Yeah. So she's worried about you.
Yeah. So the other thing I would really like to ask you is a little bit about the play, because I know you've written the most amazing book called Attachment Play, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And I always tell people I'm really bad at playing, and everyone goes, "No, you're not." But it's just because I'm so passionate about how it impacts on behavior and how it heals stress that I become passionate and want to do it. Can you tell us a little bit about attachment play?
It's basically forms of parent-child play, quite simple, actually. Doesn't involve a whole lot of equipment. These forms of play, they strengthen attachment, they strengthen the connection. They can help children heal from stress and trauma, and they can help solve behavior problems. So it's very powerful. They can accomplish those 3 things all at once. So one of the basic forms is what I call non-directive child-centered play, and this has been researched quite a bit. Some people call it mommy time or daddy time or special time, and it's just basically focusing on the child for maybe a half hour a day. I even, you can even set a timer. You've made some lovely videos about this. It's just doing whatever the child wants to do, and just letting them choose what to do. And sometimes they will bring up issues that are bothering them. They'll be playing with a family of teddy bears and act out a quarrel maybe their parents had. They might be, time during this pandemic, they might want to play doctor. So it's all very important to just focus on the child, let the child do what they want to do. It doesn't seem like much, but it's very powerful. It's very powerful.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I obviously know about doing that, but in our busy lives, realistically, we were only doing it on the weekend. And since the pandemic started, I've sort of said to my husband, we have to do half an hour every single day. And he has been willing. And it's been absolutely transformational. And in fact, I didn't do it the last 3 days because during the weekend I had my workshop, and there just wasn't time for it. And I really noticed how it impacted on their relationship with the siblings, on their behavior. It's just such a little small thing that we can do that can impact make ripples, really.
Especially when there are other children, it's important to focus one-on-one with each child individually, and because often we feel like we're with our kids all day long, but often we're with both or all of them if we have more than one, and it's not the same as giving individual attention to each child. And even if it's only, studies have found that even just a half hour once a week can actually improve children's behavior. It's amazing.
Yeah, we're really enjoying it. But also, I've shared a couple of times with parents, it's not always how you think it's going to turn out. Because I
Yeah.
once had a session with my daughter where I'd set a limit earlier on in the day and she was still mad with me. I'd said she had to come off the iPad or something. And she didn't want to play with me, but I still offered the time because it was our time together. And she said, "Mm." And so she sat down and she wrote she hated me on a piece of paper for half an hour. And then I wrote little notes like, I love you. And she wrote, well, I hate you. And I wrote, well, I love you very much. And eventually she said, I like you just a little bit,
Oh.
maybe. And then right at the end, she drew this picture of our family with hearts all the way around and skipped off. So
Oh.
sometimes offering that space might not be this joyful experience, but if you still offer the space, they can
Mhm.
get the
Yeah. Oh,
connection.
that's lovely. I love that. Yeah. It can be boring for parents. That's another uh, something that parents sometimes tell me, but it's important to just make that time because it's so important for the children to feel seen and heard and just attended to. They're always saying, look at me, mommy, or watch me, or play with me anyway. So, just meeting that need where we're focusing totally on them, it's really just accomplishes quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really special time. And actually, the more you do it, the more you enjoy it as well.
Mhm.
Although
Yeah.
my husband did say the other day that it was the most painful thing he had to do for a full hour. So it can be really difficult, but I think he sees the benefit of it, so it's worth connecting in that way.
Yeah. It can be hard,
Yeah, yeah.
especially if we feel like there's a million other things that we have to do. It's
Yeah,
hard.
and I think the one thing, I don't know if you suggested this book or whether I heard Marion Rose say it, but the sort of thing where you focus just on your child in that moment has really helped me. So just when my brain's thinking about 5 million things and I'm like, oh gosh, do I have to play this Sylvanian game again? Um, to just look at their little hands and their eyes, and then you just melt and you're right there with them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Quite a useful sort of thing to support
Yeah.
parents in that game.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's other forms of play. That's only one of them. That's the basic one. But there's lots of other kinds of play. There's regression play, letting your child act like a baby and just pretending they're baby. Especially if there's a younger, a baby that's just been born in the family, or cooperative play is really important, especially during times of stress. Just doing cooperative games or doing cooperative activities as a family. It's all really important. Simple cooperative game, just building a tower as tall as you can with blocks. Each
Mm.
person takes a turn. Just simple things like that. It really can help bring families together and help children feel less competitive with their siblings and so on.
Yeah. And also, I shared a little game this morning, kind of the physical connection games that you talk about. The sort of exploding kisses game where you've got kisses all in your mouth and they, they're coming out. And you kiss
Yeah.
your child all over. And I played it the other morning and it just transformed their behavior. It was amazing
Mhm.
what they sort of felt so loved and connected.
Yeah. And children let us know when they want to play, when they need to connect through play or to heal through play. Often they'll send cues, and sometimes we miss those, or we think of them as misbehavior. Or, for example, if a child just grabs you around the knee, I'm thinking of a young child, kind of you in the kitchen trying to cook, and they just hang on to your legs and won't let you go and stand on your feet. Uh, just pretend that you're glued together. I mean, just turn it into a game. Oh my, we're glued together. We have to stay like this forever, and get them to laugh a little bit and take just maybe 30, 60 seconds to play that, walking around the house with them stuck to your legs. And they'll probably then just go happily play. They just were letting you know they needed that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's so hard in that moment to engage in that game, but if you just make that one little moment
Yeah.
literally can be 1 minute, can't it, of playing in that
Oh,
game and you can move on.
yeah.
Actually, Jürgen Pieters, who's a level 2 instructor, he was staying at our house, and we'd had a very busy time at the workshop, and I wasn't really available to my children. But when he got home, both of mine attached to his legs, and we called it the magic shoe game, and he pretended they were stuck, and then they made him collapse on the floor, and there was so much laughter. And then what was really lovely is they felt so connected to him. My youngest daughter, who won't let anybody put her pajamas on, said, Jürgen can put our pajamas on tonight.
Yeah.
So just amazing, even for not for parents, for grandparents and aunts and uncles. These games are amazing. Yeah, I know, because I'm going to go into sort of crying and raging now, but I know lots of parents who do find the crying difficult. I always say you do have the laughter and the play as well, to use and enjoy more. But of course, there's still the crying and the tears and the healing aspect of this. And this is a really important part of aware parenting. So I'd love you just to share a little bit about why it's important and how we can support our children with their crying and tantrums.
So that's one of the second main aspect and tools of aware parenting is really listening and accepting children's painful emotions. And that's, for most parents, that's even harder than playing. So it's children heal by crying, and they heal by expressing rage and temper tantrums and having meltdowns. And it's been so misunderstood. And so many books, that's one of the main reasons I wrote my books. So many books say, they hitting, biting, temper tantrum. I mean, they combine it all in the chapters on discipline, and without realizing that the release of emotions, the harmless releasing of crying and sadness and fear and rage, that is actually what will prevent many behavior problems. So it's a matter of accepting children's tears and tantrums. And that's why I wrote a whole separate book on that called Tears and Tantrums. And just to emphasize that aspect of this approach. So from birth on, we can help children heal from stress and trauma. And there's just amazing changes in children when they've been allowed to have a good cry with loving attention. They can just totally transform them.
Yeah, and I think it's just that it's quite a difficult thing for parents who haven't been listened to in that way to be able to. So it takes a lot of inner work, doesn't it, to deal with it. I know in your books you always have at the end of your chapter some work that we can do to heal from our own childhoods. Be able to listen more fully.
Right. I mean, many of us were punished for crying or sent to our rooms if we had angry outbursts or really were trying to express anger, or we were hushed by being fed or being some kind of soothing that repressed the emotions instead of allowing them to come out. So I do think children need to be comforted when they cry, but the kind of comfort that doesn't stop them from crying, not the kind that said, hush, hush, you're okay, don't cry kind of comfort. So there's different kinds of comforting. So we were raised this way with the freedom to express emotions, and not many people were. It's hard. It's hard to allow our children to express their emotion these ways. It makes us feel like we're failing as parents, like they shouldn't be doing. Good parents, don't have children who scream and cry a lot. We've been led to believe that. That's false. That's false.
Yeah. It's just a normal stress response, isn't it? And allowing to release all the emotions. Right. And it is wonderful when you're able to sit through a big release, because they do come out of it calm, connected, relaxed, and ready to kind of carry on with the day.
Yeah. And they sleep better.
Yeah.
They behave better. They learn better. They're healthier.
Yeah. And there's another little aspect that you have with the crying and raging, which I love sharing with parents, because often parents are at a loss of why their child is crying over absolutely nothing. So they just think, something really tiny's happened. But actually, there's a reason why they're having this massive meltdown. And I know you call it the broken cookie phenomenon. Would you mind just explaining a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, an imaginary scenario is when your child, let's say 4-year-old, had a difficult day at school, some kind of preschool, or and then lots of stressful things happen, and then she comes home and she has lunch, and you offer her a cookie with lunch, and it's broken, and it's the last cookie, and it's broken, and so she throws herself on the floor and has a full-blown temper tantrum because she says the cookie's broken. She doesn't want it, and she's mad about that. Well, it probably has nothing to do with the cookie. That's the point I make. So children find little pretexts, little upsetting things, very minor things like a broken cookie or a lost sock, or they can't find the picture they drew yesterday, or some little thing that seems, or they've hurt their finger and there's no bruise, not even any blood, and then they seem to cry, and it seems to be totally out of proportion with the incident. So that's the hardest for parents to accept, because they think their child is being totally unreasonable and spoiled, manipulative. No, it's none of that. This is a child who is stressed, who is simply trying to heal, release those emotions, and restore physiological homeostasis, basically balance, physiological balance. They're just trying to keep themselves sane and healthy and release those feelings. And so they find opportunities to trigger the crying. And this can be very confusing for parents.
Yes, I think once you do know that, you're able to accept it so much more, because you know that maybe you don't even know what the stresses were, but you're able to then just support them through that massive outburst. And I've seen it so many times with my children. And we've had a couple of screen limits set recently, that the outburst has been just so not in connection with actual setting of the screen, and the crying and anger and rage. And I've just sat through it. I said, no more screen time now, time is up. And once it's all out, we're off we go, skipping along, ready for the next thing.
It had nothing to do with that, really. Yeah, it's just a way, it gives them an opportunity to release what they needed, what that's been building up, the stress that's been building up.
Yeah. And I think especially now, during this time, because I think there's so much stress that has been bubbling, just especially my eldest daughter, I didn't realize how much she was missing her connection with her friends, because we've been giving her lots of connection, but there's this connection and the change and the uncertainty. So we have had so many more broken cookie moments, I must say.
And sometimes it's okay to just say no to things, to limit what we're willing to do. Like, no, I'm really not going to read that book for the 10th time now. I really want to do something else. I mean, that can be a broken cookie, and that can actually give children the opportunity to release emotions. It's not necessarily, people think it's maybe a permissive approach. It's not. We can set limits, and we can have pressure on what we're willing to do. It's okay to be authentic and honest, and to understand that children can use these limits I call it loving limits, just in a very loving way. No, I'm not going to read that book again right now. I don't have time. And then welcome the anger, welcome the tears, instead of thinking that we have to keep our children happy all the time. That's the happiness trap.
Yeah.
Okay? Our job as parents is not to keep our children happy. Our job is to meet their real needs. There's a difference. There's sometimes a difference.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point to make, because I think it's very hard when you want to do something a bit more gentler. You often go more towards the permissive side because you don't want to be authoritarian. And I love the idea of loving limits, because children have to have boundaries and limits to feel contained and safe and loved, and also to have those broken cookie moments. And so I really like the fact that it's just a limit that you set, but you can set it with love, and you can be there and support them through those big emotions. So,
Yeah.
important part.
And the main reason, too, for limits is if we don't set limits, we start to feel resentful of our children. Then they start doing things that we really can't handle. And so, to maintain the relationship, a good relationship, just like we do with our partner, we need to let them know what our needs are and how much we can do for them or how much we can handle. So that's another reason for some boundaries.
Yes, it's been quite a journey for me, because I found those so difficult in the beginning, but I must say I'm getting much better at them the more that I practice them and see how it does make them feel safe and more supported. So it's really important. Dr. Solter, I know we're sort of running out of time a little bit, but I could talk to you all day, because I love all your work, and it's impacted so much in my life and many other families I know. But I'm just wondering how parents, if you could just tell us a little bit about your books, actually, that you've written, and how parents could get in touch with you or find out more about the Aware Parenting philosophy.
Yeah, so my website is Aware Parenting Institute. It's awareparenting.com. It's all one word, Aware Parenting. I've written 5 books: The Aware Baby, which is conception to 2.5, Cooperative and Connected, it's ages 2 to 8.
Amazing book.
Thank you. Tears and Tantrums, Attachment Play, and Raising Drug-Free Kids. That's from conception to age 25. That one.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, and they've been translated into, one or more of them has been translated into 17 languages. So that's really exciting for me. They're getting read around the world.
Yeah, make more accessible to more families and more parents. So that's such wonderful news. Well, I'll share all your details at the end of this, because the International Attachment will be sharing this lovely interview I've been able to do today. Thank you so much, Dr. Solter, for taking the time out. I know it's early morning in California, and it's getting into early evening here in London. And I hope I can speak to you very soon. So tk you for your time.
Thank you. It was good talking with you.